If we had had a Manhattan Project for compost, not only would we have fed the world, we would have done it without three-legged salamanders, infertile frogs, and a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico.
Hello, and welcome to Working with me, Dan Doriani, hosting a podcast where we explore faith, work, culture, and the way believers can make a difference in their corner of the world. Well, friends, I'm delighted to have with me today Joel Salatin, who describes himself as a libertarian, Christian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. That's one of the best descriptions I've ever heard. Joel is a man who actually farms and does innovative things with creation care and animal care. Wrote a book I recommend called The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, which we'll talk about in a little bit. He also speaks a great deal and writes about his views. Joel, it is delightful to have you with us. Do you want to say a little bit more about who you are?
Sure, I can. And thank you, Dan. It's a real honor and a privilege to be with you, especially on this platform. I spend most of my time speaking with creation worshipers, and it's always a privilege and an honor to be able to have a platform that reaches creator worshipers who care for creation because it's God's stuff. And so it is really an honor. So we farm in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, which is on the western edge of Virginia. If you know your history, it was the breadbasket of the Confederacy during the Civil War. And Cyrus McCormick invented the reaper in a blacksmith shop about 10 miles from us and started the Industrial Revolution in 1837, which is also the year that an Englishman set sail on a ship named the Beagle and told us that the world was not made by God. It's also the same year that Justus von Liebig in 1837, an Austrian chemist, decided with his vacuum tubes that all life is just simply a reconfiguration of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, and launched the chemical fertilizer movement. So 1837, we had the Industrial Revolution, started with the reaper. We had God taken out of creation, and we had biology taken out of life. And so it's kind of interesting confluence. And so those things have developed now to where, we are now multi-generations down to iterations of what that kind of thinking does, in the world, in the culture. And so our farm, we started, my mom and dad bought this place in 1961. I was just 4 and grew up here. And dad was an accountant. Mom was a school teacher. The off-farm jobs paid the mortgage. It was finally paid off when I was a teenager. I loved the farm, wanted to stay here. We're trying to figure out, how do we make a living here? We'd never made a living. So after a very short 2.5 years as a newspaper reporter, locally living at home, I got married to my high school sweetheart, and we lived in the attic of the farmhouse on about $300 a month, drove a $50 car, grew all of our own food, had our own firewood, and were able to make the break September 24, 1982, came back to the farm full time. And it took us about 3 years to realize we would make it, and we did make it. And today we have a crew of about 22 people who earn a living here. We service some 10,000 families with food, numerous restaurants, institutions, some boutique groceries, markets, and we've just been blessed beyond measure.
Well, that's a terrific self-introduction. And let me say that at least 2 things that you mentioned bear follow-up. The first one is the difficulty in having viable farms that are not on an industrial scale. So you've obviously made that work, but maybe I'll go first to the topic that you hit a little bit at the very top, and that is the connection or disconnection between environmental folk, people who want to take care of environment, or people who want to take care of creation if they're Christians, and the faith. It does seem antithetical, as you say, in some of your, just now and in some of your writings. It seems as though people who want to care for environment and Christians are at odds. You tell this marvelous story of being at Berkeley and getting praised instead of hissed when you mention God as a source of your creation care. I call it creation care.
Yeah.
Because there's a creator. Let's start with this. Why are Christians viewed as anti-environmental when the Bible clearly tells us we're supposed to take care of creation as early as Genesis chapter 2, verse 15? You and I both know there's also the statement, exercise dominion, which makes people angry, and they blame Christians for wrecking the environment. But, you got to read, these verses are just 10 or 20 sentences apart.
Yeah.
Exercise dominion, take care. They go together. It's not one or the other. So we know that. Why do we have such a hard time making that point with people who are environmentalists?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to realize that the modern environmental movement, as we know it, grew out of the English literature the Romantics, Bysshe, Shelley. I've never seen anything as beautiful as a tree, and they were basically animists. They viewed God is in the tree, God is in the cat. They were sophisticated animists, not animists like in the jungles of Amazon, okay, or Indonesia, but they were sophisticated animists. And so the initial kind of environmental movement, as we think about it, as it developed in, 1920s and 30s, was very much a non-godly. It was not about God. It was about worshiping creation as a being. And it developed the idea of Gaia. Gaia. The earth is a thinking, responding being.
It's our mother.
Yes, of course, Mother Earth. Yes, exactly. And so, of course, what Christians, one of the problems that we have in our faith community, and you can disagree if you want, but I see one of the problems we have is the same thing that the other side has. Is we tend to get on something and we run that pendulum way past balance. And so what happened was that since the environmental movement tended to come out of a liberal political belief, the EPA, government control, big government, and earth worship, the faith community responded to that. The pendulum swung farther than it needed to. And essentially the faith community said, well, a pox on all you people. We're not even going to think about whether we, how cows are raised or whether we have good earthworms or anything. It's all going to burn up anyway.
And of course, there have been Christians who said it's all going to burn up anyway. And of course, you can find Christians who have erred significantly.
Sure.
I'm pretty confident you and I would agree that that's not holistic biblically.
No, it's not. And so what happens is in the average church group, if you're going to have a potluck and I go in and say, hey, how about instead of serving this on styrofoam plates, how about we use paper? Or better, how about we go down to the Salvation Army thrift store and buy a bunch of mismatched plates, and we'll just wash them. We'll wash them, and we won't have any trash, when we're done with the potluck. Well, in the average church, the deacon or the elder is going to grab you and say, "What are you, some sort of commie pinko tree hugger, liberal?" And you can't even have the conversation. That's where we've gotten kind of in the conservative faith community versus the environmental community. So we have on our side, we have let go. We do not now hold that high moral, ethical road. We are seen as the rapists and the exploiters of the planet because we poo-poo the idea of compost instead of chemicals, and the faith community basically goes with the cheap food policy. Cheap food. Let's go eat, Chick-fil-A. So we got enough money to put in a missionary barrel, and Chick-fil-A is one of my my red hot ones because they purport to be such wonderful, and they are. I mean, I've met with them. I've met with their top VPs.
As individuals, they're believers, but you're saying their practices. Their practices could be more conformed to Scripture.
Yeah. Well, what happened? Can you imagine? Remember back several years ago when there was all the demonstrations about them one man, one marriage thing, and I actually had dinner with about 3 of the direct report VPs that report to Dan Cathy, the founder, down in Atlanta. Shortly after that, that was the best marketing thing they'd ever done. I mean, they just sold up the wazoo. Well, I asked those guys, I said, can you imagine if when that was happening, if you'd have come out with another press conference that says, not only do we believe the biblical one man, one vote rule, but we also believe in the sanctity of life to the extent that we're going to start asking how to buy chickens that are able to express their chickenness.
Yeah, right. So, in Proverbs, I love to cite Proverbs 12, verse 10. A righteous man has regard for the life of his beast. And I know you know that passage,
Yeah.
which is foundational to the chickenness of chickens and the piggish. Let the animal be the animal. Let me just let you run on that for a little bit. Why is it important, Joel, for us to let a pig be a pig and a cow be a cow? And maybe you can comment on how that connects to industrial farming and unkindness to animals. I'll just let you run with that for a couple minutes if you'd like to.
Sure. I'd be glad to. So why that's important is that honoring and respecting the pigness of pigs, or the chickenness of, or tomato-ness of tomatoes,
right, sure,
is a moral framework on which we hang respect and honor to everybody else. And so while we certainly don't worship animals, and in fact, all the animals in the Bible, there are a lot of them there, but none of them has a name. So, let's keep this in balance. When I say honor and respect the pigness of pigs, I'm not saying you can't eat pork. I'm not saying I don't eat, pork chops and bacon. But I am saying that in its life, honoring the distinctiveness, the unique qualities of that being is what creates an ethical framework in which we honor the uniqueness of our spouse, our children, people we're in church with. It creates an object lesson. Here's the thing. I would suggest that creation, the physical creation that we interact with in every day, is actually an object lesson of spiritual truth. And so, for example, when we say we are to bring glory to God, or we talk about God's glory, glory is the uniqueness of something. It's the thing that something has that nothing else has. And we tend to spiritualize the word glory and use it only for divinity, but the Bible is not that clear. The Bible talks about the glory of the moon, the glory of the earth, the glory of trees, the glory of old men, the glory of young men. It talks about the glory of you, me, bodies celestial, by the glory of kings. What is this? Well, clearly all of these things have a glory. They have a uniqueness to them. And so if we're going to, for our children, if we're going to create a framework, a philosophical framework, a worldview framework in which they honor the glory of God, it starts by putting on the table food that honored the glory of the pig. Yeah, what is unique about the pig? All right, that can stimulate this. Why do we go to Farmer John's where the pigs can root and run around and get fresh air and sunshine and express their pigness? Well, that's what's unique about the pig. All right, then that stimulates a discussion. What's unique about God? And how do we accentuate and honor the uniqueness of God in our life?
Right. So, for example, you would be honoring the uniqueness of a person. Let's say a child who is athletically gifted. They can run fast. They can clearly catch a ball, throw a ball. They don't really want to do it. They don't like it. For whatever reason, they want to do other things. And you want to honor that, even though they have an ability that at the moment they don't want to express. If I'm hearing you correctly, it's a listening posture, respect posture, receiving.
Yes. So
the pig, the chicken, the tomato, your spouse, your friend. Don't ask them to be what they're not. Let them express themselves.
Yes. And then the extension of that then becomes what is life? What is is life biological or mechanical? Mm-hmm. And one of our problems in our, I would say, Greco-Roman, Western, disconnected, individualized, parts-oriented type of thinking, we have downgraded life to a fundamentally mechanical status. So nobody in a university research setting is asking the question, how do we make pigs happy? The only question is, how do we grow them faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper, as if they're inanimate piles of protoplasmic structure to be manipulated however cleverly hubris can imagine to manipulate it. And that cheapens life. It cheapens life to the extent that everything becomes inanimate and mechanical. And as a result, we don't then create sacredness in the sacrifice of life to create life. So now we have fake food. We have we have all sorts of lab meat, all sorts of things. What do they say? Well, so nothing has to die. The whole point is, well, so nothing has to die. Well, let me tell you something. In order for something to live, something has to die.
Right.
I mean, a compost pile takes the living and eats it, dead, kills it all, and then resurrects it in regeneration in another plant. And so there's nothing more fundamental to the ecological, to the spiritual object lesson of ecology than the life, death, decomposition, resurrection. Everything is eating and being eaten. Everything is sacrificing itself for something else, and there can be no life without death.
Right.
And of course, what a wonderful spiritual truth. Yes, there is no life without the death of Christ. I mean, that is the perfect metaphor picture for true life.
So let me try a couple other things out on you that I'm sure are connected to your thought. One is I like to, when people say, I don't want to, make an animal suffer by killing it. First comment is, well, it's got to live. Well, there's probably far more beef and pigs and chickens that live because we're choosing to raise them and so forth. We give them life as well as take their life. That's one point. But the other is that mechanized farming, or the monoculture approach to things, which some vegetarians like, allegedly saves the lives of animals. But the way we harvest grain fields kills enormous numbers of birds and ground animals. And it's not as though by avoiding the slaughter of pigs and cows and chickens, we avoid killing animals. If anything, we kill more animals, and maybe vastly more animals, the way we harvest an acre of wheat or corn.
Yes. Well, what it speaks to is an anthropocentric view of life, that things that look like us are more valuable than things that don't. And so what we do is we segregate life into sentient and non-sentient things. But I can tell you, when the acacia trees on the Serengeti emit chemical pheromones to make the leaves upwind bitter so the giraffes won't want to eat them, if that's not sentience, I don't know what is. We're tapping maple trees right now. We got sugar maples. We're tapping the maple trees right now. When a wind comes up, they stop giving sap, because the sap is the bloodstream of the tree, and the tree is saying, and I'm not. Don't read more into this than I'm saying. The tree knows that if the wind blows a branch and breaks it, it needs to rush sap to that wound and heal it. And so when the wind comes, it stops giving sap in our bucket, and when the wind stops, the sap starts running again. That is sentience. The fact is that everything, life, we are surrounded by sentient beings that we can see, that we can't see, the quadrillions of microbiome in our own bodies. We're only 15% human. We're 85% non-human. And so all of this is a relational trading commercial. I'll trade you some molybdenum for a piece of that polysaccharide over there, and it's like a huge mall going in and around our cells and in our bodies. Everything is making trades and decisions. This is what life is all about. A car doesn't make decisions. This stapler here, this stapler does not make decisions. But life beings make decisions. And so how we create sacredness in the sacrifice of whether we eat a tomato, whether we kill a tomato or kill a cow, how we create sacredness in that sacrifice is how we respect and honor that plant or animal in its life. There is no sacredness to taking the life of a Tyson chicken, because they've been disrespected and dishonored their entire life. They've lived in a stressful, anti-chicken environment their whole life. So that sacrifice becomes sacrilege.
Let me ask you, thanks. Let me ask you this question. Would you say that this is primarily a matter of doing justice to the animal, caring for the animal as God wants us to? Is it entirely that? Do you think food is better if the animals are treated better? If that is part of the equation, is that a big part or a minor part of the equation for you?
Absolutely. In fact, I just wrote what we call my spring epistle. I write one big epistle for our customers every year, and I just wrote it a couple of days ago. And I posited the thought: can we eat happiness? We talk about pursuing happiness, trying to define happiness, trying to find happiness. I'll give a very personal reason why this came up. we've had now years and years working with chefs, with good chefs. And every time we work with one, we get back pretty soon, within a month or so, wow, your stuff cooks about 15 to 20% faster than what we've been getting from Marriott or Cisco or whatever, from the big places. And so we've been pursuing this, and I've asked people around, try to explain this to me. And the only thing that keeps continuing to surface is that because our animals are not stressed, they're actually living a happy life. They're not secreting adrenalines all their life. The farmed animals are always in a state of stress, and so they're dripping, drip, 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 adrenaline, and that hardens. It hardens the muscles, it hardens everything, and so they're actually adrenaline dripping. And so it tightens everything up, and so it takes a while. It takes longer to cook that because everything is tight. Now, I don't know that we have a way to measure this. We don't have a happiness meter, that I can put on a pork chop and say, is this a happy pork chop? But it stands to reason to me that because of this amazing sentient relational quadrillion decisions being made in and around me and all the time, it makes sense that if those decisions are being made by happy actinomycetes and azotobacter and mycelium, I don't want to, again, I'm not worried. I'm not ascribing to them more than, I'm not trying to, but that level of satiated happiness, it seems to me intuitively would come through our food system in some way, the way it then relates to our own quadrillion microbes in our gut, and and how they make decisions.
Well, I'll say one thing and then ask, maybe we'll switch to another theme, but it certainly seems to me that the meat I get from a farmer who says this cow has been grass-fed tastes better than the meat I get from the grocery store. That's very subjective. I'm just telling you what me and my family say when we eat the cow that was raised, if I may use the word, humanely.
Hi, I'm John Perkins, Executive Director of the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. You've been listening to our podcast, Working with Dan Doriani. The Center also offers conferences on faith and work throughout the United States. Our goal is to equip formal and informal leaders to make a difference in their corner of the world. We equip Christian leaders to run 10-hour faith and work cohorts on 3 continents. Please visit our website at faithandworkstl.org to see how your church or organization can form a faith and work cohort for people who have, or aspire to, a leadership role in their workplace. Now, back to Dan.
I want to go back to something you said a little while ago about industrialization. That's not quite the word you used, but you talked about the fertilizer process in the 1830s, 1837, I think it was. 1909 is the number I use a lot for the Haber process of nitrogen fixation, which allowed the industrialization of farming. So you're making a small farm work. I wrote you before we met that my grandfather, good man, educated man, a Wheeling, West Virginia guy, by the way, that shows up in one of your points. Hardworking guy. He couldn't make it work very well. I mean, he raised chickens and a lot of vegetables and Christmas trees, and it just wasn't working very well at an economic level. He was a happy man, but it was playing itself out as a viable farm. And now we have the monoculture brought by what some people call, like Jacques Ellul and other Christians, calls the technological imperative. And that is, if you can do it, you should do it. If you can build a giant machine to harvest 1,000 acres of corn, then by all means go right ahead. So I just want your take on all those issues. Obviously, there's more life on Earth, fewer people are starving. That's good, but it's not entirely good in every way. I'll just let you cut loose for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, well, I think the critical thing to understand is that societal problems don't have a nice, clear, defining edge all the time. You get innovation this direction, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. You get innovation this direction, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And you poke around, and just think of all the different permutations of non-public education that preceded the homeschool movement. People were poking around everything from Christian schools to correspondence courses to all sorts of things. And then boom, the homeschooling movement. I'm not saying it's the only way to teach. I'm just saying that that's an example of how you get these poke arounds, if you will. There's this ragged in innovation. And so in the turn of the century, back in 1905 to 1915, there was a big concern that the world was going to run out of food. Cities were getting bigger, and we were still, primarily using draft power, horses, mules, oxen, and you simply couldn't transport food that far or move the manure that far, and so the size was minuscule. And so, the chemical fertilization approach was obviously N, P, and K also are the basis of ammunition, bombs. So World War I, World War II.
N, P, and K, just for the record, is nitrogen, potassium, and
phosphorus.
Phosphorus, thank you.
Nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. That's what you make explosives out of. And so the World War I, World War II war effort financed the mining, the distillation, the bagging. It created the massive and accelerated and cheapening of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So there was another guy named Sir Albert Howard, who was a Britisher running the indoor experiment station in India during his career from about 1920 to 1940. And he, in 1943, brought to the world his life's work, which is now kind of considered it is the foundation of all sustainable regenerative agriculture, which was an agricultural testament in 1943, right in the middle of World War II. And basically, he was a scientist who brought to the world for the first time the scientific formula of commercial aerobic composting, and that's nitrogen, carbon, water, oxygen, and microbes, 5 ingredients in the proper ratios. That had never been done before. It had never been codified as a scientific formula, and he did that. Well, post-World War II, you're a farmer, and you probably lost a son or two in the war, or they're not coming back to the farm, and you're in your 50s, and somebody comes to you and says, hey, with this little bag, you can dump this on and you'll grow corn. And Sir Albert Howard says, well, if you want to keep shoveling, we didn't have front-end loaders yet. We didn't have chippers. We didn't have black plastic pipe to generate water. Didn't have PTO-powered manure spreaders. We didn't have any of the infrastructure to run a true carbon-based, decomposition-based fertility program. And so be gentle on old grandpa. He probably reached for that bag just like you and I would have, okay? But then you move forward, and by the 1960s, we have front-end loaders, we have chippers, we have a chainsaw. We can now efficiently run a biomass-oriented fertility program. Today, the biomass-based or carbon-based fertility program is running circles around the chemical program, but it had a 20-year head start in infrastructure and dominated the land-grant universities, the great big corporations that buy ads in the newspapers. Here's the point, Dan. If we had had a Manhattan Project for compost, not only would we have fed the world, we would have done it without three-legged salamanders, infertile frogs, and a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico.
Thank you. That's deeply informative. Let me move to something a little bit different. We don't have a ton of time left, so let me ask you some big questions, and I call these rapid fire questions, and you have no more than 90 seconds to answer any of these, unless you're doing an awesome job, in which case I might let you keep going. All right?
Okay.
So just for the record, if you're listening to this, Joel is laughing as I say that. I don't know why. Maybe because he's going to answer as long as he wants. Maybe because he likes the format. Okay, Joel, you ready?
Yes.
What would you like to have achieved in 5 or 10 or 15 years? What would you like to say? I contributed by God's grace. I contributed to the blank.
That I contributed to the faith community waking up to the creation stewardship or creation care mentality.
Thank you. That was a crisp answer. I think the biomass concept, I think that'd be terrific if you were getting people to label it. And I think it's so important you label the fact that it takes decades for infrastructure to fully develop any idea, which everybody who studies technology knows that. But if you don't study technology, you just go to the store and you buy mindlessly. You don't know that. So
Right.
let's hope that you get to talk more and more about the biomass approach to fertile farms.
The other one then would be that we take all of the current biomass that's going up in our $5 billion forest fire debacle in our country, and all that biomass becomes composted, and nobody's buying chemical fertilizer anymore because we're actually growing earthworms with organic matter.
And can we just add that does help with global warming? You and I both know that.
Yeah.
We're not going to go down that road right now, but number one. Number two, what do people get wrong about farming if all they do is watch the media, listen to, the main media, read books, watch movies? What do they get wrong? What do you want to correct?
I think the number one thing they get wrong is that farmers are all the same. The media loves to just say farming or agriculture or farmers. And probably some of the biggest heat that I receive when I do speaking engagements is that I dare to differentiate between good farmers and bad farmers. There are good farmers, there are bad farmers. There are farmers who grow soil. There are farmers who erode soil with different protocols. And so I think what the media likes to do is create a homogeneous block. The teachers, right? Teachers, preachers, cab drivers, Uber drivers, farmers, and the fact is, in all of these vocations, there are good ones and bad ones. And that would be the thing I think most people just don't understand.
One of the most destructive things I see is the labeling of green and brown. Your industry is brown. Well, can be. Doesn't have to be. Your industry is green unless you waste constantly because you're in a green enterprise. If you had a little time with a young farmer who wanted to be mindful of animals, piggishness of pigs, cowishness of cows, take care of the soil, and make some money, not a gentleman farmer, little side interest, I have 5 acres, but really a farmer. I mean, that's their vocation in life. What are a couple things you would say to this young man or woman or couple?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is define your mission, define your vision. If you can't condense your mission into one sentence, you don't know where you're going, and you won't be able to attract a team to go with you. So I can recite our mission statement, which is to develop economically, environmentally, and emotionally enhancing agricultural prototypes and facilitate their duplication throughout the world. And everybody on our team, everybody that's involved with us can recite that mission statement, because that gives purpose, and purpose is what drives. Farming is often a kind of a lonely, thankless kind of thing.
Long hours
as far as the culture is concerned. And so we have to have something that is more sacred than I'm growing cheap potatoes, or I'm just trying to grow, cows or whatever, or making milk. There's got to be a sacredness to it that creates purpose beyond physical, that creates a legacy quasi spiritual purpose that will drive you on. Thank you.
What can ordinary people do to improve their relationship with food and grocery stores and so forth?
Three things. Number one, I hope I'll get this in 90 seconds, but I'll do my best.
You can have 2 minutes.
Okay. 3 things. Number one, get in your kitchen. You cannot have an authentic integrity food system and be as abdicating of domestic culinary arts as we are in this country. So we need to get rid of single package servings. We need to begin to eat together. We need to cook from scratch. We need to understand that we cannot have an honest food system without participation from all of us. We don't get to sit this one out. That's number one.
Fantastic. Go ahead.
Right.
Number two.
All right. Number two is viscerally touch something living to appreciate the mystical power of life. I don't care whether it's a vermicomposting kit under your kitchen, a quart jar of mung bean sprouts on the windowsill, or a honeybee hive up on the roof. but do something, grow something, plant or animal, personally, to just appreciate that there is more going on than at your fingertips. We live in a time right now where people have this idea that the world is at my fingertips. We sit in front of screens, we play video games, we do all this as if I've got the world under control and I can do this. But when you produce a tomato, when you collect eggs from a chicken, when you do something, you realize, wow, life is way more intricate, magical, profound than just it doesn't revolve around me. There's something bigger than me going on here. That's number 2. Number 3 is to build a relationship with food, with your food provenance. That means that you might, instead of taking a Caribbean cruise this year, how about investing in a tour of 5 local farms to find out if they're good or not? Go build and this includes, you can do some navigating on websites as well. That's fine as well. But the point is to actually take personal responsibility for your body's provenance. Personal responsibility. And those 3 things: get in your kitchen, grow something, personal responsibility with building a relationship with provenance. Those are the 3
Terrific.
things.
I'm just going to say one thing. This is not germane to your answer exactly, but we do grow stuff. Or we have very poor soil in our part of Missouri because it was all scraped off and carried away and sold by the developer years ago. It wasn't all that good anyway. A lot of clay around here. They never grew a whole lot more than a few easy crops and lots of grass. They grow grass for sod. But we do grow tomatoes and a bunch of herbs and some other vegetables every year. And I just love the unpredictability of it. Sure. We usually get a pretty steady crop. And the herbs are really good. The herbs and spices are very reliable. But the tomatoes and the beans and the squash are wildly irregular depending on the weather. It's just a very chastening sort of experience. And one year we only got like 7 tomatoes, another year we got 800. And I'm not quite sure how it varied that much. You could probably tell us. If logistics were no object, what would you do for 1 year?
For a year, probably read stuff that I'd like to read that I'd seem like I don't ever have time to read.
Okay.
And write and write about it. I would rather write than eat, literally. And I love communication. I love storytelling. I know I've been gifted with an ability to articulate things that a lot of people think about but don't have the words to say. And I'm not saying that pridefully. I'm just saying that in humble appreciation of a talent that I have. And so I have no desire to really travel or to go to exotic places, but just to be able to take a sabbatical and immerse in dig down into deeper understanding of what other people are doing, what other people have found, how other people have said it, and then to be able to put it in my own words and express that in a way that I think people would get would be really really fun.
That's great. And you are articulate and passionate, which we like. And you're also a good writer. I mean, not everybody's a good writer and speaker, but you have both gifts. I do recommend the book, The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, for anybody who wants to follow up. Of course, Joel does have a website, and it sounds like I'm wrapping up. I almost am. And ask you more questions. What's the name of your website? I forgot to say at the beginning.
It's Polyface Farms, Polyface, Polyface Farms. It's the farm of many faces. And I don't have a personal website.
Okay.
I'm a total Luddite. But the farm has all of my, speaking engagements. I've written 16 books. It has all those there, as well as, if you don't know where to start, we ship nationwide. You can start with us while you search for your good local farmer. Nothing makes us happier than to get a letter. I heard about you guys. I didn't know where to turn, so I started getting from you. You've shipped to me. And I've spent the last 6 months looking and looking and looking. And guess what? I've found my local farmer. I'm sorry to leave you, but I found that is just thrilling to us. And I really mean that sincerely.
Yeah, of course it is. My last question for you is, although we've talked about your faith and your practices a lot, could you give us summary, as if you are speaking to a child that's in your life, that's 8, 9, 10 11 years old. Honey, this is how, child you love or like, this is how my faith reflects what I do. This is how I express my faith in my work. What would you tell a bright, interested child?
It's God's stuff. It's all God's stuff. And you might have a backpack. How would you like it if I got in your backpack and just tore it up and strew it all over everything? You wouldn't like that very much. And if you loaned me your backpack, you would want it back at least as good as you loaned it to me. And maybe if I used a notebook, you'd like to see a brand new notebook in there. You'd like to see more pencils in there than you had at the beginning. And so just like you would care and expect that kind of care over loaning me your backpack, God has loaned us his earth as an object lesson of his abundance and mercy and provision for us. And so if the earth is God's backpack and he has handed it to me to care for, I want to hand it back to him with more soil, more water, more breathable air, more better immune systems in all the plants and animals, more abundance and more provision than he handed it to me. That is God's expectation, just like it is our expectation to each other. And the privilege that you and I have is to be his caretakers of his stuff. Is that not the coolest thing in the world?
That's a great answer, Joel. It's been a delight to have you sharing with me and also with our listeners. I'm quite confident you've deeply encouraged and challenged all of our listeners. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be with you.
Working with Dan Doriani is a production of the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. We seek to promote faithfulness in the workplace, in education, in discipleship, and in the stories of believers who've applied their faith at work. If you want to put your faith to work and change your corner of the world, visit our website, the Center for Faith and Work St. Louis. Look for faithandworkstl.org. That's one word. We'll help you start a cohort with like-minded believers who also want to practice their faith at work. This podcast is donor-supported. To keep us going, please donate on our website. Maybe more importantly, you can support us by listening, by subscribing, by sharing, by liking us, by posting us on your favorite platform, or go old school and tell a friend.